The night I saved a king, I was digging through trash for dinner. The world didn't stop. No music played, just the sound of the city pretending not to see me. He collapsed right there, beside the dumpster. Blood on his hands, fear in his eyes. I thought he was just another lost soul, like me. But when he whispered the word king, everything changed. They said I made it up. The police laughed. The news called me crazy. But I know what I saw. The ring on his finger, the crest that rolled to my feet, the man they swore never existed. So go ahead. Call me a liar. But when truth wears rags, no one ever believes her. I never thought sleeping under the bridge would lead me to a king. That night, the air was heavy with smoke and the smell of rain. The city lights blinked in the distance like tired eyes, watching but never helping. I pulled my torn blanket tighter around me, trying to stop the cold from biting into my bones. The bridge above rumbled every time a car passed, shaking dust down on my face. People walked past, their shoes clicking on the pavement, pretending not to see me. I had gotten used to that, being invisible. It's strange how the world can be so crowded, yet you feel like you don't exist in it. My name is Amara, and I've lived on these streets for 3 years. I wasn't always like this. Once, I went to school, had friends, even dreamed of becoming a nurse. But life doesn't always ask what you want before it breaks you. After my parents died in a fire, everything slipped away. The house, the clothes, even the people who promised to help. Now, it was just me, the bridge, and the endless sound of the city pretending to care. That night, I hadn't eaten all day. I was sitting by the fire we made from trash when I heard a noise, not the usual street noise, but something different. A kind of desperate cough, followed by a groan. I looked up. A man was stumbling along the side of the road, clutching his chest. His clothes looked too fine for this area, dark suit, polished shoes, but his face was pale and drenched in sweat. For a second, I thought maybe he was drunk, or maybe someone from uptown who had lost his way. "Sir, are you okay?" I asked, standing slowly, unsure if I should go near him. He didn't answer. He just collapsed. Right there on the dirty concrete, his head hitting the ground with a dull thud. For a moment, I froze. No one else was around. Cars drove by, but no one stopped. My heart was pounding. What if he died? What if someone saw me and thought I hurt him? I pushed the fear away and ran to him. His pulse was weak, but still there. His lips trembled like he was trying to say something. "Help! Phone!" he gasped. I reached into his pocket, found a sleek phone, and tried to unlock it, but it needed a password. My hands shook. "Don't die, please," I whispered. I looked around for help, but the only people nearby were sleeping under cardboard boxes or lost in their own battles. So I did what I could. I tore part of my blanket, lifted his head onto it, and stayed with him. After a few minutes, I saw a dark car speeding down the street. I waved both arms, shouting, "Stop! Please stop!" The car screeched to a halt. 2 men jumped out, their suits sharp, their eyes sharp too. They looked at the man on the ground and froze. "Your Majesty!" one of them shouted. My breath caught. "Your Majesty?" I stepped back. I didn't understand. One of the men knelt beside him, shaking him gently. The other turned to me. "Who are you? What happened here?" I tried to explain, but my voice trembled. "He just fell." I saw him and tried to help. They didn't answer. They lifted the man, the king, into the car, shouting orders into their radios. I stood there, speechless, my heart thudding in my chest. One of the men turned to me again. "Did you touch him? Did you take anything?" I shook my head quickly. "No, I just tried to help." He stared at me for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he said, "Go home." I wanted to laugh. Home. If only he knew. They drove off, leaving me in the glow of their red taillights and the smell of burning rubber. The city went quiet again, as if nothing had happened, but something had. When I looked down, I saw something shiny on the ground, a small, golden pin shaped like a lion's head. I picked it up and held it tight in my palm. It felt warm, almost alive. I didn't know it then, but that night had changed everything. By morning, the city would be filled with news. King Elias missing after night visit to the city. And me? I'd still be under the bridge, the only one who knew what really happened. But no one would believe me. When morning came, the city was already loud. Buses honking, traders shouting, radios blaring news from every corner. I woke to the sound of footsteps and the chatter of people gathering around a newspaper stand nearby. I rubbed my eyes and sat up. My blanket was damp from the night's rain, and my stomach groaned. The smell of roasted corn drifted from a vendor's stall, making my hunger sharper. I dragged myself closer to the crowd, pretending to be just another passerby. A man was reading aloud from the front page. "Breaking news, King Elias of Dorland reportedly went missing last night after a private visit to the city. His guards say he was last seen near the old bridge before being rescued and taken to safety." My heart skipped. The bridge. That was where I saw him. People started whispering, arguing about what really happened. Why would a king come here of all places? Maybe it's not true. Rich people like to hide their mistakes. I wanted to speak, to tell them I was there, but I didn't. No one listens to a girl who sleeps on the street. To them, I'm just background noise. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about that man's face. The way his hand trembled when he asked for help. The way those men called him "Your Majesty," and that golden pin. It was still in my pocket. I took it out and stared at it. Small, shiny, shaped like a lion's head. It looked expensive, far too fine for someone like me. For a moment, I wondered if I should sell it. One pin like this could buy food for weeks, but my heart said no. Something about it didn't feel like mine to trade. So, I slipped it back into my pocket and decided to find out more. I started asking around. Most people just waved me off. Some even laughed. You saw the king?" "Sure you did," one man sneered. Another woman shook her head. "Homeless girls see all kinds of things when they're hungry." Their words stung more than I expected. But I wasn't ready to give up. By noon, the sun burned through the clouds. I wandered to the market square, where I usually begged. My throat was dry, and I could barely stand when a woman selling bread called out, "Hey, girl!" I turned. She was short and round, with a kind face and hands covered in flour. "You look half dead," she said. "Come, eat something." "I have no money," I murmured, stepping back. She waved her hand. "Who said anything about money?" "Sit down." Her name was Aunt Grace. She handed me a piece of bread and a cup of warm tea. I tried not to gulp it down too fast. She watched me quietly for a while, then said, "You've been around this area before, haven't you?" I nodded. 3 years now. 3 years is a long time to fight the streets and still smile like that. I didn't realize I was smiling until she said it. Something about her voice felt like safety, something I hadn't felt in a long time. When I finished eating, she said softly, "You look like you've got something heavy on your mind." I hesitated, then whispered, I saw someone last night. A man. He collapsed near the bridge. Later, I found out he was the king. She blinked, surprised but not mocking. Are you sure? I nodded quickly. I helped him. Then his men came and took him away. She looked down, thinking. And you told anyone? Yes, but nobody believes me. They think I'm lying. Her eyes softened. People are quick to doubt what they don't understand, but truth doesn't disappear just because it's ignored. I wanted to cry. No one had ever spoken to me like that. Before I could reply, a loud voice came from the street. Two men were showing a picture around. We're looking for anyone who might have seen this man last night. They were wearing official uniforms. My heart raced. The picture was of the king. But they didn't look friendly. Their faces were hard, searching. Aunt Grace leaned closer. Do you want to talk to them? I shook my head quickly. No, they won't believe me either. She studied me, then nodded slowly. Then you stay quiet for now. Sometimes truth needs the right moment to be heard. That night, after everyone closed their stalls, she let me sleep in the back of her shop, my first time on an actual floor, not concrete. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the golden pin in my hand. Somewhere out there, the man I helped was alive. A king. A man with everything. Power, servants, a palace. And yet, the only person who had seen him at his weakest was me, the girl with nothing. As the wind rustled the shop's curtain, I whispered into the darkness, they don't believe me now, but one day they will. For the next few days, I stayed behind Aunt Grace's shop, helping her whenever I could, washing plates, sweeping, or handing bread to customers. In exchange, she let me sleep there and eat once a day. It wasn't much, but it was peace. Something I hadn't known in years. The city, though, was restless. Everywhere I went, people still talked about the missing king. Some said he had been attacked. Others said he ran away from his palace to live among ordinary people. Every story was different, but none of them were true. Sometimes I wanted to shout, I was there, but Aunt Grace's words kept echoing in my head. Truth needs the right moment to be heard. That moment hadn't come yet. One afternoon, I went to fetch water from a public tap a few streets away. The sky was burning hot, and the air smelled of dust and roasted groundnuts. I filled the jerry can halfway, then sat to rest. A group of children ran past, laughing. For a brief second, I smiled, until a voice behind me said, Amara? I froze. Hardly anyone called me by name anymore. I turned around. A man stood there, wearing simple clothes, jeans, and a blue shirt, but his posture was too straight, his eyes too alert to be ordinary. Yes, I asked carefully. He smiled faintly. You don't remember me, do you? I saw you that night near the bridge. My heart stopped. You were there? He nodded. I was one of the drivers. You helped His Majesty. I stood slowly, not sure whether to feel relief or fear. Is he okay? The man glanced around before answering. He's alive. But things are complicated. What happened that night? It's not supposed to be public. The king was attacked, and whoever did it is still out there. I felt a chill. So that means someone tried to kill him? He didn't answer directly. It means you saw something important. Something dangerous. My hands trembled, but no one believes me. He looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, maybe that's for your own safety. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper. Take this. If anyone asks you about the king, show them this name. He'll know what to do. I hesitated. Why are you helping me? Because, he said, lowering his voice, the king told us before he collapsed. There was a girl. She tried to save me. He didn't forget you. And before I could say another word, he was gone, blending into the crowd like smoke. I unfolded the paper. The name written there was Daniel Cole. I didn't know who that was, but the neat handwriting made it feel important. That night, I couldn't sleep. Aunt Grace noticed. "You're quiet tonight," she said, kneading dough by the counter. I told her everything about the man, the message, the name. She frowned. "If this is true, you're walking into something bigger than you think. But if it's your truth, maybe it's time to stop hiding from it." The next morning, I made up my mind. I took the small bag Aunt Grace gave me and tucked the golden lion pin safely inside. "If I don't come back," I told her, "thank you, for everything." She hugged me tightly. "You'll come back. Just remember, the truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers until the world has no choice but to listen." The address led me across the city to a quiet neighborhood far from the markets and noise. The buildings here were tall, clean, and silent. I found the right gate, took a deep breath, and knocked. A young man in glasses opened the door slightly. "Yes?" "I'm looking for Daniel Cole," I said. He studied me, my worn clothes, my tired face, and almost closed the door. But then I pulled out the pin. "Please, tell him it's about the king that changed everything." He hesitated, then motioned for me to wait. A few minutes later, a tall man in a white shirt appeared. His voice was calm, but sharp. "You said you know something about the king?" I nodded quickly. "I helped him that night, near the bridge. He was hurt, and I stayed until his men came." He narrowed his eyes. "Do you have proof?" I held up the golden pin. He dropped this. He took it, turning it over in his hand, his expression unreadable. Finally, he looked up at me and said, "You shouldn't have this." My stomach tightened. "I didn't steal it. He dropped it, I swear." His gaze softened slightly. "I believe you. But if you're telling the truth, then someone's been lying to the public. The palace announced the king was found near the airport, not the bridge." I blinked. "But that's not true." He nodded slowly. "Exactly. Which means there's a cover-up, and now you're the only witness who knows what really happened." My chest felt tight. "What do I do?" He sighed. "For now, you hide. And you keep your head down. The truth is dangerous, especially when powerful people don't want it told." As I left his office, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't invisible anymore. Someone somewhere knew I existed, and not everyone would want me alive for long. I didn't know fear could have a sound until I heard the echo of my own footsteps leaving Daniel Cole's office. Every step away from that glass building felt heavier, like the city itself was watching. He had looked at the pin for barely 10 seconds before his calm mask cracked. That alone told me everything. He knew. He knew the king was alive, or at least that someone important didn't want me talking. I walked fast, trying not to look back. The streets were busier now, engines humming, traders shouting, children tugging their mothers' hands. But even among all that noise, I could hear my own heartbeat pounding like it was trying to warn me. When I reached Aunt Grace's shop, the smell of baked bread hit me like a memory. Safety warmth. But as I stepped inside, I knew that safety was already gone. "Amara," Aunt Grace said softly, turning from the oven, "you look like you've seen a ghost." I dropped the small cloth bag on the counter. "I met him," I whispered. "The man from the note." She froze, her flower-covered hands still mid-air. And? He knew, I said. The king is alive, but someone's hiding it. Aunt Grace's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. She glanced at the door, then lowered her voice. You need to leave, child. If what you're saying is true, it's not safe here anymore. Her words landed like stones in my chest. Leave? Go where? She looked away. Anywhere they can't find you. People go missing over smaller secrets. I wanted to argue, to tell her I wasn't afraid. But deep down, I was. Every sound outside, the screech of tires, a distant shout, made me flinch. I was still the girl from under the bridge. I didn't belong in the kind of story that involved kings and secrets. That night, I packed the little I had, a worn sweater, a bottle of water, and the golden lion pin. I tried to sleep on the bakery floor, but sleep wouldn't come. I kept replaying Daniel's voice in my head. You didn't see anything, girl. Forget the pin. Forget the man. Forget? As if it were that easy. By dawn, I was already on the move. The city was half asleep, fog hugging the streets. I walked toward the bus terminal, staying close to walls, avoiding open spaces. That's when I noticed the black SUV parked across the street. Its engine idled quietly, windows tinted too dark to see inside. I froze, pretending to tie my shoe. The door opened slightly, and a man stepped out. Suit, earpiece, dark sunglasses even before sunrise. My stomach dropped. I turned and slipped into a narrow alley, heart hammering. My shoes slapped against the pavement as I ran past trash cans, laundry lines, and stray dogs. I didn't stop until I reached the back of a crowded market. I pushed through the stalls, hiding among baskets of oranges and shouting sellers. When I finally stopped, gasping for air, I realized my hands were shaking. That's when a voice behind me said, "You dropped something." I turned sharply. A young man, maybe in his 20s, held out a small folded piece of paper. He looked out of place, clean clothes, confident posture, but his eyes were kind. "Who are you?" I asked, stepping back slightly. "My name's Sam," he said. "Daniel Cole sent me." My blood ran cold. Before I could speak, he continued. "He told me to make sure you get somewhere safe." He said, "You were right." I stared at him, unsure if it was a trick. Right about what? That the king's alive. The words hit like thunder. I searched his face for any sign of a lie, but all I saw was urgency. "Why would he help me?" I asked. "Because he can't do it openly," Sam said. "Too many eyes. Too many people pretending to serve justice while hiding the truth." I hesitated, glancing around. The black SUV had turned into the market entrance. "Come with me," Sam urged. "Now." I didn't have a choice. We slipped out through the back, weaving between alleys until we reached an old minibus parked by the edge of the road. Its paint was chipped, its seats torn, but it felt like freedom. As the bus rumbled out of the city, I looked back one last time. The skyline blurred behind me, the glass buildings shrinking until they were nothing but memory. "Where are we going?" I asked. Sam glanced at me. "Somewhere the king was last seen. If your story's true, we might find more than we expect." I nodded slowly, my hand gripping the golden pin in my lap. It gleamed faintly in the morning light, the lion's face fierce and proud. For the first time in days, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel. Hope. But beneath that hope, a weight pressed on my chest, the knowledge that I was now part of something much bigger than survival. The fate of a king, and maybe the truth itself, rested in the trembling hands of a homeless girl no one believed. I never thought telling the truth could make me feel like a criminal. When I walked into the police station that morning, my heart was still pounding from everything that had happened. The man I helped, the one I found lying cold and shaking under the bridge, his face had been all over the news. They called him King Daniel of Eldridge, a visiting foreign leader who vanished during a private trip. I knew that face. I'd seen it close enough to know the worry lines around his eyes. So I told them. I told the officer behind the glass that I had helped him, that he was hurt, confused, and that someone came for him before I could get his name. The officer barely looked up from his computer. "Miss, are you sure about that?" he asked, typing lazily. "You're saying a homeless girl like you found the King of Eldridge under a bridge in Chicago?" I nodded. My throat tightened. "Yes, sir. I swear it. He dropped something. A gold pin. I still have it." He took a deep breath, then waved me off to another desk. The next officer looked at me differently, not kindly, not harshly, just tired. "We get all kinds of stories," he said. "You folks see things, hear things. Sometimes the mind plays tricks, especially on the streets." He was talking to me like I was broken, like truth was too expensive for someone like me to own. I reached into my pocket and showed him the pin, a small golden lion with a crown. He examined it for a few seconds, then sighed. "Could be a souvenir," he muttered. "They sell all sorts of royal stuff online these days." That was when the laughter started. Two officers at the back chuckled. "Hey, maybe she's the new royal advisor," one said. The other replied, "More like the queen of fiction." Heat rose in my face. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a whisper. "I'm telling the truth." When I walked out of that station, the morning air hit me like ice. The city buzzed around me, cars, chatter, life moving fast. But I felt invisible again. Worse than invisible, I felt foolish. By noon, my story was already spreading among the shelters. Some laughed, others whispered, and a few looked at me with pity. "You should have kept quiet," one woman told me. "People don't like stories they can't explain." But I couldn't let it go. That night, I sat under the same bridge and looked at the pin in my hand. It wasn't just a trinket. It had weight, carved details, and initials etched faintly on the back. DKE. I knew it meant something. A soft rain started falling. I looked at my reflection in the puddle and asked myself a question I never had before. What if no one ever believes me? A car slowed nearby. Two men inside looked my way, then drove off. Something about their faces made my chest tighten. They weren't strangers. One of them had been outside the police station earlier, watching. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just disbelief. Someone didn't want my story to be heard. I clutched the pin tighter and whispered, "If the truth scares them this much, it must be worth something." That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound, a car door, a siren, a shout, felt like it was coming for me. But deep down, I made a promise to myself. Even if the world called me a liar, I wouldn't stop telling the truth. Because somewhere out there, a king I once helped was still alive. And I was the only one, brave or foolish, enough to remind the world of it. The next morning came too quickly. I hadn't slept much, only drifted in and out while listening to the city breathe above me. Every car that passed made me flinch. Every echo under the bridge felt like a whisper meant for me. When dawn broke, I tucked the golden lion pin inside a folded piece of cloth and slipped it into my jacket. If no one believed my words, maybe this little thing could still speak for me. I decided to try again. But this time, not with the police. They'd already turned my story into a joke. I needed someone who asked questions for a living, someone who still believed in truth. I found a payphone near a gas station and called the local newspaper office. My voice shook as I asked if anyone would listen to my story. The man on the other end sighed. "Ma'am, we get dozens of calls every week. Unless you have evidence, there's not much we can do." "I do," I said quickly. "A gold pin. It belongs to the missing king." There was a pause. Then, "Come by the office tomorrow morning." It was a long walk across town, but I made it. I must have looked out of place in that lobby. Dirty sneakers, frayed hoodie, and a blanket rolled under my arm. The receptionist didn't even hide her judgment. "You're here for Mr. Hale?" she asked flatly. "Yes." She pointed me to the corner seat. "Wait there." Mr. Hale came out 20 minutes later, tall, tired eyes, the kind of man who'd seen too many lies to believe easily. He motioned me into his office, where the air smelled of coffee and paper. "So," he said, leaning back, "you're the girl who claims to have saved a king." "I don't claim it," I replied. "I did." He smirked a little, not cruelly, just skeptically. "Why don't you start from the beginning?" So I told him everything. The night under the bridge, the man's trembling hands, his accent, the fear in his eyes before those black cars came. I placed the golden pin on his desk when I finished. He stared at it longer than I expected. Then he picked it up, examined it under the light, and frowned. "You said you found this on him?" "Yes." He took out his phone and searched something. "This emblem. It's not sold anywhere online. It matches the crest of Eldridge, the real one. Only members of the royal household are allowed to wear it." My heart skipped. "So, you believe me?" He hesitated. "I believe you found this. Whether you found the king, that's another matter." Still, he asked questions, lots of them, about the bridge, the men, the cars, even what the stranger said before he was taken. When I mentioned the words, "They'll find me again," his expression changed. By the time I left, he'd promised to look into it. That was more than anyone else had done. That night, I found a quiet alley behind a bakery to rest. The smell of bread reminded me that kindness could exist even in cold places. I thought about Mr. Hale, about how he looked like someone who wanted to believe but didn't know how anymore. Maybe the truth scared him too. The next day, he called me from a blocked number. "Amara, don't go back to the bridge," he said, his voice low. "Someone's been asking about you, 2 men. They came to the office saying they were from the embassy, but their IDs didn't match." My stomach dropped. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing," he said. "But listen, that pin of yours?" I checked with a contact at the paper's archives. The king wore one just like it during his last public appearance. "There's a photo. I'll send it." When the message came through, I couldn't breathe for a moment. It was the same pin, the same lion. Proof, real proof, that I wasn't crazy. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt fear crawling under my skin. If this was proof, then someone powerful had a reason to keep it buried. That night, as I sat in the corner of an empty parking lot, I whispered, "You were right, Daniel. They did find you again." I didn't know who to trust anymore. Not the police, not the strangers watching from cars, maybe not even the journalist. But I knew this much. The truth had a heartbeat now, and it was getting louder. And once the world heard it, it wouldn't be so easy to silence me again. I used to think the scariest thing in the world was being invisible, but I was wrong. The scariest thing is being noticed by the wrong people. After Mr. Hale's warning, I spent the next few days moving from place to place. An alley, an abandoned bus stop, the back of an old diner. I didn't stay anywhere longer than a night. Sometimes I saw the same black car, parked at different corners, headlights off, like it was waiting. Then, one morning, everything changed. The radio at a nearby shop was talking about a miracle. The missing king of Eldridge had been found alive. He was in a hospital, recovering after being discovered on the outskirts of the city. I froze. The man I'd saved, he was alive. But there was something off about the news report. The anchor said he had no memory of what happened to him, only that he'd been rescued by a team of agents 2 weeks ago. The same night, I pulled him from the cold. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the cup of coffee I'd begged for. They had rewritten the story. They'd erased me. I went to find Mr. Hale. His office window blinds were half shut when I got there. He opened the door quietly, as if expecting someone else. "You shouldn't be here," he said, glancing toward the hallway. "You heard the news," I said. "They found him." He nodded. "I did. And if you're smart, you'll stay far away from it." "Why?" "Because whoever handled that story made sure no one asked how he was found. They scrubbed the details before it hit the press." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "That pin of yours, it's now classified evidence. The embassy contacted us this morning asking if we'd seen anything like it." My stomach turned. "They know I have it?" He looked at me, eyes full of regret. "Amara, I think they've always known." That night, I went to the hospital. I didn't have a plan, just a pounding heart and a truth too big to keep inside. Security guards stood by the gates, and news vans lined the street. I waited until the crowd shifted and slipped in through a side entrance. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and secrets. Every step I took echoed in the corridor. Through the glass of a hospital room door, I saw him, the man from under the bridge. His hair was shorter, his skin paler, but it was him. He sat up slowly, talking to a nurse. I pressed my palm to the glass. "Daniel," I whispered. He turned, eyes calm, unfocused. For a second, I thought he recognized me, but then he just looked through me, like I was another reflection in the glass. Tears burned my eyes. I wanted to burst in, to shout, "I saved you! I'm not lying." But my voice stayed trapped in my chest. A man in a dark suit appeared beside me, his badge flashing silver. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Step away from the door." I backed up slowly. I just wanted to see him. I helped him that night. He was hurt. The man's jaw tightened. "Miss, you need to leave now." I turned to go, but before I did, I looked one last time through the glass. The king's eyes met mine again, just for a moment, and I saw something flicker there. Confusion, maybe memory. It was enough to keep me going. When I stepped outside, the night air hit my face like freedom and fear combined. I didn't know if he'd ever remember me. I didn't even know if he was safe among the people who claimed to protect him. But I did know one thing. The truth was closer now than ever. As I walked away, the same black car rolled by, moving slow. I didn't run this time. I just kept walking, my hand tight around the golden pin in my pocket. If they wanted to erase me, they'd have to work harder. Because the man they called a king was alive, and deep down, I believed he still remembered the girl who pulled him out of the dark. Sometimes the smallest things hold the loudest truths. For me, That truth fit in the palm of my hand, a golden lion-shaped pin, dull from time, yet heavy with meaning. After that night at the hospital, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his face, the king's blank stare, the flicker of recognition, the way the guard pushed me away as if I were nothing. It wasn't just anger that kept me awake. It was fear, because now I knew someone was trying to erase me. The next morning, I sat on a park bench near the bus station, sipping from a paper cup of cheap coffee. The city moved around me, unaware of my storm. People in suits, mothers with strollers, joggers with headphones, everyone with somewhere to be. And me, I had nowhere but the truth. I pulled out the pin again. The lion's head was engraved with a pattern too fine to be random. Initials beneath it, D.E. Daniel Eldridge, the King of Eldridge. I remembered how it had slipped from his jacket that night when I dragged him away from the fire. I had picked it up without thinking, assuming it was some kind of badge. Now, it was my only link, the one thing they couldn't rewrite. I decided to show it to Mr. Hale again. His office was darker than before, blinds half closed, the smell of old coffees filling the air. He looked startled when he saw me. "Amara, you shouldn't—" "I found something," I said, cutting him off. I placed the pin on his desk. He stared at it for a long moment before exhaling slowly. "You kept this all along?" I didn't know what it was until now. He picked it up carefully with a tissue, turning it under the lamp. "There's an inscription," he murmured. "And look at this crest. This isn't some knockoff. This belongs to the royal family." "So you believe me now?" I asked, my heart thudding. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "I believe you found something. But believing that you saved him, that's a dangerous claim, Amara. If we publish that, you could be targeted." "I already am." That silence after I said it told me he knew I was right. He made a call to a contact at the embassy, pretending to be an old colleague seeking background on royal insignias. I listened as the man on the other end grew cautious, then abruptly ended the call. Mr. Hale put down the receiver. "They know someone's asking questions," he said, "and they don't like it." We both looked at the pin. Small, shining, almost innocent, but it felt like a ticking bomb between us. Later that evening, I hid it inside a tiny cloth bag and tied it under my shirt. My heart pounded with every car that slowed nearby. The black sedan hadn't been around all day, but that almost scared me more. Then, just before midnight, a knock came at the side door of the shelter I sometimes stayed in. Mrs. Carter, the older woman who ran the place, called for me. "There's someone asking for you," she whispered. "Says he's from a newspaper." I followed her, my pulse racing. A man in a grey coat stood by the doorway, hat low, face half hidden. "Miss Amara," he said softly, "I work with Mr. Hale. He's missing." The words hit like cold water. "Missing? Since when?" "Since this afternoon," he said. "We think it's connected to the story you gave him. Whatever's on that pin, it's not just a nameplate. It's a key." My breath caught. "A key to what?" He looked over his shoulder nervously. "Proof that the king wasn't just lost. He was betrayed." I stepped back, my mind spinning. The stranger lowered his voice. "Keep that pin hidden. Don't trust anyone who asks about it, especially not the embassy." He pressed a card into my hand and left before I could say a word. The door shut, and all I heard was my heartbeat and the faint sound of rain starting again outside. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat by the window, clutching the golden pin through my shirt. The city lights flickered below, like stars that had fallen and refused to die. They could ignore my words. They could silence the press, but they couldn't erase the truth I held. And if this pin was truly a key, then I was ready to find out what door it opened. The next morning, the story broke. But not the way I hoped. The newspapers screamed headlines like, "Homeless teen claims royal rescue. No evidence found." They printed my name, my photo, even where I used to sleep. The article called me an unstable girl seeking attention, quoting unnamed official sources. They made me sound like a liar. I stared at the paper in disbelief. Mr. Hale's disappearance had been twisted too, written off as a personal matter. The man who had believed me, who had risked helping me, was now erased, just like my story. People began to whisper when I walked by. Some laughed, others looked away. At the shelter, a few women told me to stop bringing trouble to their door. Mrs. Carter tried to defend me, but fear spread faster than truth ever could. By nightfall, I had nowhere to stay again. I found myself back under the bridge where it all began. The city lights blinked like broken promises above me. I held the golden pin tightly in my fist. It had lost some of its shine, maybe from my hands, maybe from the lies surrounding it. Still, I knew what was true. I had seen that man's face. I had pulled him from the cold. I had heard his weak voice say, "Thank you." And now the world thought I made it all up. A few days later, I was walking past a cafe when the TV caught my eye. The king, alive, smiling, stood before cameras at a press conference. His advisors surrounded him. He looked stronger, though a faint scar ran across his temple. Reporters shouted questions. One voice asked, "Your Majesty, there's a rumor about a homeless girl claiming to have saved you. Any truth to that?" He hesitated, just for a moment. His expression froze, eyes unfocused, as if a thought flashed behind them. But then he smiled faintly and said, "I owe my life to my security team. They found me before it was too late." My chest tightened. It felt like being erased all over again. I turned to leave, but behind me, two men in suits stood near a black car, watching. I recognized one from the hospital. Their eyes met mine, and my heartbeat quickened. They didn't need to say anything. Their stare said it all. Stay silent. That night, I hid inside a laundromat until closing, pretending to wait for someone. When the lights dimmed, I crouched behind the dryers, clutching the pin under my shirt. The hum of the machines drowned out the chaos in my head. I thought about how easy it was for people to doubt someone like me. No address, no family, no voice that anyone cared to listen to. The world only believed what came from clean suits and polished stages. But the truth doesn't need a stage. It only needs time. 2 nights later, I decided to make my own proof. I found an old digital recorder in a thrift shop dumpster, broken. But after some work, it clicked on. I recorded everything. My voice trembling, I told the story from the beginning. The bridge, the night, the fire, the golden pin. When I finished, I said one last line into the recorder. If the world doesn't believe me now, it will someday. The next morning, I left the shelter quietly. The newspaper had already moved on to new stories. The king's recovery, political deals, charity visits. My name had vanished from the headlines. But the black car hadn't. It was parked across the street again, engine idling. I didn't run this time. I looked straight at it, slipped the recorder into my pocket, and started walking. Let them watch. let them follow. I wasn't the same girl who hid in shadows. I was the girl who carried the truth. And truth, no matter how small, had power. As I disappeared into the morning crowd, a strange calm washed over me. Doubt was a weapon they used to silence me, but I was learning how to turn it into strength. Because belief wasn't something I needed from them anymore. I just needed to keep walking until the truth caught up. The world moved on, but the truth didn't. It waited, silent, patient, hidden beneath the noise. 3 weeks passed since the press conference. I was living behind an old bookstore, sleeping near its dumpster where the scent of old paper strangely comforted me. Every night, I played back my voice recording, reminding myself that I wasn't crazy, that what I remembered was real. One rainy evening, as I huddled under my thin blanket, a soft knock came at the back door. I froze. Hardly anyone ever came here. "Amara?" a whisper called. It was Mrs. Carter, from the shelter. She looked nervous, clutching a folded newspaper. "Someone came by looking for you," she said, her voice trembling. My heart skipped. "Who?" She shook her head. "A man with an accent. Said he was from the royal delegation. He left this." She handed me a note sealed with a crest, a lion surrounded by a wreath. My fingers shook as I unfolded it. "To the girl who holds what was lost, meet me at dawn by the bridge where truth began." No name, no signature, just that single line. I didn't sleep that night. I waited, my mind battling between fear and hope. By dawn, I walked to the bridge, the city still half asleep. The air smelled of wet asphalt and river mist. A black car was parked near the same spot where I'd once pulled him from the cold. The engine was off. A man stepped out slowly, tall, wearing a grey coat and dark gloves, and behind him, stepping into the light, was him. The king. He looked thinner than on television, paler, but his eyes were searching, as if chasing something inside him that refused to stay buried. I took a cautious step forward. "Your Majesty," I said softly. My voice almost broke. He looked at me for a long moment. "Amara," he whispered, as if tasting the name. He remembered. Not everything, not yet, but enough. He motioned for his guards to wait by the car. "That night, I see flashes," he said slowly. "A fire, cold pavement, someone's hands pulling me up. Your face. For a moment, I thought it was a dream." "It wasn't," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "You collapsed right here. I thought you were just another stranger who needed help. I didn't know who you were until it was too late." He nodded slowly, then pulled something from his coat pocket, a photograph. In it, he was wearing the same jacket I'd seen that night, the golden lion pin still attached. "You kept it," he said quietly. I reached under my shirt and brought it out, still tied to its cloth string. I did. It was the only proof I had. He took it gently, holding it like something sacred. "They told me I'd been rescued by my team, but I remember no team, only you." Before I could speak, one of his guards shouted from the car, "Sir, we need to leave now." The king hesitated, then looked at me again. "I will fix this. I promise." But as he turned to go, a dark van screeched around the corner. Men jumped out. Not guards this time. They moved fast, shouting into radios. The king's security detail drew weapons, chaos breaking loose. "Get her out of here," one of them yelled. Hands grabbed me, pulling me toward the bridge's side path. I struggled, shouting, "Don't let them take him." Through the confusion, I saw the king glance back, his hand pressed against his pocket where the pin now rested. He shouted something I couldn't hear before disappearing behind his guards. Moments later, the van sped away, chased by police cars. The bridge fell silent again, sirens echoing in the distance. I stood alone, shaking, soaked from the mist. But this time, something was different. He remembered me. He had my name. And now, the truth wasn't just mine anymore. When I looked down, I noticed something glinting near my feet. A small, folded paper that must have fallen from his pocket during the chaos. I picked it up. Inside were the words, "Trust no one from the embassy. What you carry can change everything." I held the note close to my chest. The fear that once froze me was gone, replaced by something stronger: purpose. The world might still doubt me. The lies might still spread. But the truth had found its way back to light. And this time, I wasn't letting it go. The palace gates had never looked so tall. Behind them, the world that had ignored her story was suddenly waiting for her to arrive. The news had spread overnight. The king remembered. And not just vaguely, but in full, trembling clarity. He had ordered an official statement, and most shockingly, requested that the girl he once dismissed be brought to him with the honor due to truth. Amara stood at the edge of the crowd outside the gates, her hair brushed but still damp from the early rain. She could barely breathe. Reporters shouted questions she didn't answer. Strangers waved their phones to capture her picture. Just days ago, these same faces had laughed, rolled their eyes, and called her the liar girl. Now, they looked at her like she was a story come to life. When the gates opened, two guards stepped out, not the ones who chased her away before, but men in crisp uniforms with eyes that looked human again. "Miss Amara," one said softly, "His Majesty is expecting you." She followed them past marble arches and fountains that glittered like glass. Everything looked too perfect, too far from the cracked pavement she had slept on. Her sneakers squeaked softly on the polished floors as they led her into a tall, sunlit hall. The smell of wax and roses filled the air. She tried not to stare at the golden chandeliers or the paintings of men who had never known hunger. And then she saw him. The king stood at the far end of the hall, not in his royal attire, but in a simple black suit. His eyes met hers, tired, remorseful, but kind. "Amara," he said, her name steady now, as though saying it fixed something inside him. "You were right, and the world was wrong." She didn't know what to say. Her throat felt tight. The last time she'd seen him, he was being pulled into a van and shouting words she couldn't hear. Now, the distance between them felt heavier than ever, a space filled with every night she'd spent alone, every sneer, every doubt. He stepped closer. "I remember everything. You saved my life." Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them away. "No one believed me," she whispered. "I didn't believe you either," he admitted. "And that will stay with me." He turned to his advisors, who stood awkwardly at the edge of the room. "This young woman is to be recognized officially for her courage. She is the reason I'm alive." The hall fell silent. The cameras clicked again, but this time it wasn't mockery. It was awe. The sound filled the space like applause. The ceremony that followed was small but powerful. The king placed a medal over her neck, a silver crest, shaped like the same lion she had kept hidden all this time. "For truth that outlived doubt," he said, his voice breaking slightly. She smiled faintly. her fingers brushing the medal's edge. "I didn't save you for this," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "That's why you deserve it." Later, when the crowd began to thin, the king pulled her aside into a smaller chamber filled with sunlight. He handed her a sealed envelope. "This is for you," he said. "A home, a scholarship, and funds to start whatever life you choose. You've carried more than any young girl should ever have to. Let the world carry you for a while." Amara stared at the envelope, then at him. "Will they believe me now?" He sighed. "They already do. But even if they didn't, truth doesn't need belief to be true." That night, Amara stood outside the palace walls, the medal warm against her skin. People who once ignored her now smiled as they passed. A little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, "That's the girl who saved the king." Amara crouched down, smiling. "No," she said softly. "That's the girl who didn't give up." The boy grinned shyly and waved. As the sun began to set behind the skyline, the city lights flickered awake one by one. For the first time, Amara wasn't watching from the shadows. She was part of it. The streets that once swallowed her now seemed to breathe with her, alive and new. Somewhere inside the palace, the king watched from a balcony. He saw her lift her face to the wind, her hair catching the last gold of sunset. For a long moment, neither of them was royalty or homeless, just two lives bound by a single act of courage that changed everything. And though her past still lived in whispers and scars, Amara finally understood. Being believed wasn't the real victory. Surviving was. Truth had found its voice, and the world, at last, had listened. The small apartment didn't feel real at first. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the softness of the carpet under her bare feet, the way the curtains swayed when the wind passed. It all felt like someone else's dream that she'd stumbled into. Amara stood by the window, holding a mug of tea that was still too hot to drink. Below her, the city buzzed. As always, taxis honking, vendors calling, life moving as if nothing had changed. But for her, everything had. It had been 3 months since the palace gates opened for her. 3 months since her name turned from rumor to truth. And now, she was no longer the homeless girl who claimed to save a king. She was Amara Johnson, founder of the Second Chance Foundation, an outreach project for homeless youth and families. Her first small center stood on the same block where she'd once slept under a broken streetlight. The sign above it read in simple blue letters, "Home starts here." Every morning, she walked there early, greeting the few volunteers who had joined her cause. Some once homeless, others just kind souls who believed in her mission. She listened to their stories as they handed out meals, blankets, and hope. And though her name now appeared in newspapers beside the king's, Amara never stopped wearing the silver medal under her shirt. It reminded her of where she came from and why she could never forget. That morning, as she set up folding chairs for a youth meeting, she noticed a familiar face at the doorway. A man in a clean shirt and cap stood holding a tray of sandwiches. His eyes lit up when she looked at him. "Tom?" she gasped, smiling. "The same," he said, stepping inside. "Heard you might need help feeding the kids." Tom, the old street friend who once shared scraps with her by the fire, now worked at a bakery. He laughed as they hugged, the sound rough but warm. "You're famous now," he said, grinning. "You gonna forget the rest of us?" Amara shook her head. "Never. You're the reason I made it this far." Later that day, Reporters came again, not for scandal, but for stories of change. They watched her teach kids how to write their first job applications. They filmed her speaking gently to a young girl who had run away from home. "I know what the street does to you," Amara told the girl, "but I also know what hope can do." The king visited the center quietly a few weeks later, without guards or cameras. He stood in the back while she gave a talk to the group, unseen until after the applause. When she turned, he smiled faintly. "You've done more for this city than any crown ever could," he said. She laughed softly. "I'm just returning what was given to me, a chance to start again." Before leaving, he handed her a small box. Inside was a new medal, gold this time, engraved with the words, "For courage that restored a kingdom." She didn't wear it. Instead, she placed it beside the first one on her desk. That night, after everyone had gone home, Amara sat on the steps outside the center. The streetlight above flickered the same way it used to, but now its glow fell on new things: clean walls, warm beds, and children who laughed instead of cried. She smiled at the thought. Somewhere deep in her heart, the pain of the past had softened, leaving behind something lighter: gratitude. As the city's lights shimmered on the river, she whispered, "For every one of us who was unseen, may we learn to see each other again." The wind carried her words into the night, gentle and sure. The next morning, a small boy ran up to her, clutching a newspaper. "Miss Amara," he said, breathless, "they wrote about you again. Said you were the girl who saved a king." She smiled, brushing his hair back. "No," she said softly. "I was just a girl who refused to stop believing in the truth." The boy frowned thoughtfully, then smiled. "Then you saved more than a king." Amara looked out at the city, her city now, and felt tears warm her eyes. For the first time, she understood what it truly meant to be home. Not four walls, not comfort, but peace. The kind that stays with you long after the world stops watching. She picked up her bag and turned to the boy. "Come on," she said. "Let's go feed the others." The day's just starting, and as they walked down the block, laughter echoed where silence once lived. Closing line. Some stories don't end with crowns or riches. Some end with a girl who chose truth over fear and turned her pain into light for others to follow. Some say heroes wear crowns, others say they live in palaces, but sometimes a hero sleeps under a bridge with nothing but hope to keep her warm. Amara proved that truth doesn't need power to be heard, just the courage to keep believing when no one else will. So tell me, how many truths have we ignored because of who said them? If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification button so you never miss out on our latest intriguing stories. Thanks for watching.